Tony D and Little Joan somewhere in the background, and this is a screenwriter's tip on dialogue. I'm about to, in a few days, probably start working on book 17 of the Pineys in terms of the polishing. Like, it's basically done. I just have to go through it and polish. And part of the polishing, and I've done this with screenplays, comic books as well, it's I look at it as like when painters do layering, right? Artists do layering in a drawing. You might get in comic books, you might get different thicknesses and lines to indicate where the position of certain characters are. In paintings, you'll get different sort of shades. The layering makes it more complex. It's similar to that in writing, I think. And I'm really big on dialogue. So one of the things I like to do is I'd like to go through a manuscript and think about one of the main characters, how they talk, what they've said before, what their attitude is, and really just concentrate on that one character as I go through the manuscript. Now, it kind of depends. With the Pineys, I kind of do it in groups of characters. Or sometimes I'll do several passes on it and, hit this character here or there, or just do it in scenes. It kind of depends on the book and how the characters are being grouped. In the Pineys, there are four main characters, the four cousins, and a lot of times I'll split them two and two, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way because of the events in the story. Sometimes it's 3 and 1, sometimes it's 1, 1 and 2, sometimes it's all four of them together. But with four, I can usually keep four sort of attitudes in my head. And so in the Pineys, I always have to remember that Hemingway usually gets all the funny lines, and he's, sort of the big, gregarious personality. Milton's the quiet one. He's sort of the toughest to do because I like to get Milton in some lines to remind people he's there. But, at the same time, I don't want him to come off as talky. A lot of times he's the conscience of Hemingway when it's just the two of them. But when Shelley's around, she sort of takes that role. And with Lewis, he's more of the guy who makes the worst suggestion in the room or gets panicky. He gets a lot of dialogue, but he's a very talky character. And Shelley, although she's sometimes the conscience of Hemingway, she is like Hemingway in a lot of ways in that she'll overstep her bounds. Whereas Milton doesn't sort of have that energy. He's more of a kind of, I'll go along. Shelley is the one who kind of defies whatever the norm is in the moment, as Hemingway does. Whereas Lewis is more about survival, more about what he thinks is normal. And a lot of times he doesn't understand that, in the world of the Pineys, he's the guy who doesn't know anything, right? So, and he talks in more of a South Philly, mildly gangstery kind of way. Hemingway's more of the flippant guy. Milton, just very quiet, very stoic, and Shelley, kind of girly at times, kind of full of responsibility, but with a feminine angle to her in her dialogue. So that's the kind of layering I like to do sometimes in certain scenes in the Pineys. With characters that are new to a book, that's sometimes a little harder because they're not as fleshed out. And a lot of times, those characters, their main function services the story, and the story's about the other characters, so they're just really there to give them an opportunity to mouth off, you know. So a lot of times in the Pineys, there's a lot of themes of authority and how the Galloways don't listen to authority very well and kind of do their own thing. Um, you know, and or they just the authorities just sort of go, "Oh God, we don't want to deal with these guys." Um, Sometimes it's the monsters, the supernatural beings, and they tend to be very haughty, you know, depending on their power level. Um, the Hellspawn tend to have a very similar sounding voice. They're all very evil, but in a straightforward way. There's nothing, they can't really, most of them can't very hide their natures very well. They would like to, but they're not smart enough for that. They're just ruthlessly evil and want to cause as much mayhem before it all crumbles around them. They're not very creative, most of them. It's only the sort of higher end ones that are dangerous enough to kind of use what they have. Um, so, you know, when you're thinking of dialogue, it's good to go back into your manuscripts, and just in general, it's good to do that anyway. And that's what I think is missing from a lot of rookies. They don't do that. They kind of just keep reading it and saying, "Well, it sounds good to me." You know, you want to picture it. This is why you want to read it aloud, especially the dialogue, and it really helps. I think that really helps if you're delivering the dialogue as you envision it in a movie or a TV show. Really helps to just say the dialogue out loud, even if you don't have the voice for it. If you have ever recorded one of your own audiobooks and did the voices of the characters, I think you would definitely get it. Definitely. I mean, it definitely comes out in that. Um, and you really have to picture in your head the expressions and all that kind of stuff. Um, and that kind of dialogue, like sometimes I find it hard to describe the dialogue that I want to convey because it slows down the pacing of the book to describe it too much, you know, unless it's like really, really funny that somebody's going to get it. Um, I tend to not do that description of the dialogue because it feels like it slows down the pacing somewhat. Um, it slows that bantery dialogue that I prefer in a manuscript, screenplay, or whatever. In some screenplays, you may not want that banter, you may not want that speed, but in the Pineys, I always like that light, snappy banter between characters, whether they're getting along or not. Um, if they're fighting, I like it to be intense and also move forward. I find it impossible sometimes to watch a movie or a TV show where the dialogue is bad. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and I've seen so many things, but to me, nothing drags down a movie or a TV show like bad dialogue, or just dialogue that isn't smart and on point. Now, sometimes there's a reason for that, but even characters who don't know certain information, they can often talk very intelligently. Um, Recently I did the review of Brotherhood of the Wolf, and one of the things I really liked about the movie, even though it's very slow in the beginning, is the dialogue's 100%. There's not a line of dialogue in that I didn't believe. Um, there's no moments of they're just saying stuff to give you information. It feels very organic and natural in Brotherhood of the Wolf, and that's despite watching it, as a dub. Um, for the most part, the deliveries on a dub are fine gets across what you need, but it's what they say in the dialogue that's really important. If you're wasting a lot of time talking about nonsense, your characters are talking about nothing, it's just a drag, you know? Don't feel that you can't just cut exchanges, you know? Now, once in a while in comedy, you might want that awkward sort of exchange. Hey, how you doing? I'm okay, I guess. um, but a lot of times you just don't want that, you know, especially if you've got important dialogue. You know, you want it to be crisp and clean, um, you know, or heartfelt, or intense, and there's not going to be a lot of fat in that, you know, in terms of dialogue. There's not going to be a lot of wasting time unless a character's like lying and trying to get out of a problem. But even that should be kind of on point. And you can do that. You can go over it again and again and again. And I often do in my head, you know. I often go over stories about the Pineys or scenes that I like over and over again. I got a fight scene coming up in book 17 that's fairly early in the book that I really enjoy. And oh boy, I can't tell you how many times I've rewritten that already. I must have rewritten it 5 times. Not completely, but I just keep sort of tweaking it and adding it and picturing it in my head and kind of adjusting it. No, the stairwell should be over here and you should jump down and that kind of thing. So I think it helps a lot. Now, you can get caught up in that, and I think a lot of people do. That's why it's also eventually good, once you finish a draft, to set it aside for a period of time. That's kind of where I am with 17 now. I'm trying to get 17 out of my head long enough that when I go back to it, it'll be sort of fresh. So I want to start 18, maybe get the opening chapters done. You know, I got some other stuff to do, but get 18 going in my head, get some of the vibe for 18 on paper, and then when it's time, maybe in a week or two, go back to 17 and then finally start going, okay, let's get this done. And I like to get, you know, the entire story done before I work on, you know, the extraneous stuff like, well, I have to get the book cover in production, but, you know, that needs some lead time so Vig can do his magic. But I like to think about things like, you know, the back cover and, you know, any blurbs that I might have to write for it. I you know, I have to write the Amazon blurb, things like that. And these are all things that takes time, you know, and by sort of workshopping them in your own head. A lot of times I do that in my head while I'm driving. And I'm driving to events and whatnot, and I'll just be workshopping a scene in my head, even saying some of the dialogue out loud in the car and by myself. So if you see me driving around South Jersey talking to myself, that's probably what I'm doing. But by doing that, you know, you could do too much of it, of course, but by doing that in a certain window of time, I think it gives you the best sort of feel for the dialogue. So anyhow, that's my tip for the day. Thanks for tuning in to the videos tonight. Don't forget, I'm going to be at the Hamilton Center Monday, tomorrow, at 7 p.m. for my talk on how to hunt the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there. We'll see you tomorrow.